your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. Is Alberta's healthcare crisis growing? Well, according to the province's opposition NDP, it is. Health critic David Shepherd and finance critic Shannon Phillips quoted Health Minister Jason Copping saying that Alberta's healthcare system is operating near normal. However, they argue that this is not really the case.
An Albertan named Donna had her open heart surgery canceled just a week ago in Calgary, 5 minutes before the scheduled time, because there were not enough resources to care for her post-operation. She told us this is not the staff's fault, but that she was very disappointed in the health minister for how he continues to try to present the current situation in healthcare as being normal.
Last week, I attended an information session organized by AHS where we had the city, the Chamber of Commerce, we had economic development, we had the college, local school boards, all there to discuss efforts to attract doctors. There were a number of organizations there to provide suggestions. We had volunteers from the hospital providing suggestions even. It was described that day as a community problem. But the fact of the matter is that there is a key member that was not at present. They were the only member that wasn't present, which was the Ministry of Health. The one organization that can provide the resources, an action plan, metrics, interim benchmarks, appropriate data reporting, goals, money, that organization was the one that was absent.
Bridge City News reached out to the Office of Health Minister Jason Copping for a comment, but have yet to hear back. Meanwhile, the Alberta government announced more help to ease pressures for medical emergency services. Health Minister Copping says this includes hiring more EMS workers along with more types of ambulances on the road to meet the medical needs of Albertans.
First, AHS is hiring more paramedics and boosting EMS staffing. They're moving quickly to hire into 100 full-time permanent EMS positions and extending 70 temporary positions. That's on top of the increase of 230 EMS staff we've seen in the past 2 years. And I'm pleased to announce another practical step to increase the pool of available EMS staff and keep more ambulances on the road. That's by easing staffing requirements. I'm granting a 1-year exemption to allow emergency medical responders to staff more types of ambulances. EMRs are one of 3 classes of EMS practitioners registered with the Alberta College of Paramedics. This staffing change will allow 2 emergency medical responders to transfer stable patients without the need for a higher-level paramedic.
Minister Copping says this move will allow other paramedics to respond to more urgent calls. Economy and Innovation Minister Doug Schweitzer says he will not be seeking the United Conservative Party leadership. He will also not be seeking re-election next year. In a statement, Minister Schweitzer had this to say, quote, "After much consideration, I have made the decision not to seek re-election as the MLA for Calgary Elbow. After 8 years, I am looking forward to spending more time with my family. I could not have served our province so diligently without their immense sacrifice and support." The 31st annual Alberta general election is slated on or before May 29th of 2023. A recent study out of the University of Calgary has revealed a new way to hopefully treat chronic pain using anti-cancer drugs. A team of researchers have looked at drugs that are typically used to treat lung and brain cancer and have tested them on mice to see if they treat chronic pain. The drugs were specifically tested on pain that has resulted from nerve injury and inflammation, and it was discovered that the medication responded quite well. One of the researchers behind this study says this is exciting news for those who deal with severe chronic pain.
We didn't have to create anything. We just had to repurpose the drugs that have been used for in cancer treatments, to test them for different pain conditions. The interesting part of this study was that we didn't have to create anything, and it makes it much easier in terms of timeline.
Researchers have already started looking at other types of chronic pain, such as stomach and post-surgery, to see if the medication will help those areas. Coming up, a leader of the Freedom Convoy now allowed to return to Ontario to receive an award. We have a conversation about this with the legal team representing her. But first, a quick break.
It's a hard decision for me to digest a little bit because on the one hand, as you said, he said the court is not the thought police. And then on the other hand, we hear him justifying the social media ban.
The town of High River is calling for a permanent ban on new coal exploration and development in the Rockies. The executive director for the Southern Alberta chapter of the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society says its community-developed policy outlines ways to deal with Albertans' concerns by saying no to new coal exploration and mines and phasing out existing coal mining.
High River has been very engaged in the coal conversation over the past few years. And they released a resolution in February of 2021. They passed a resolution at that point that had similar tenets to this new policy. So they have already, talked about their engagement and committed to their engagement in the coal conversation. But I think it was great, they've had a turnover of council since then. So it was great to see that the new council is still in line, that they were willing to support this policy document.
In addition to providing energy, Alberta coal is also used in the production of steel. Well, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation agrees with CPC leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre that the Liberals need to give us a break while inflation is at a record high. They want to see Ottawa follow Alberta's lead and cut the fuel tax by eliminating the carbon tax during difficult financial times. Earlier this week, our own Hal Roberts sat down with the federal director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, in Ottawa to talk about this issue in more detail. Take a look.
Franco, how much savings would this potentially mean for families?
Well, Mr. Poilievre's proposal is right on the money. He's right that Ottawa is making life more difficult for struggling Canadians because of the big tax bill that they're collecting at the pumps. Now, Mr. Poilievre's proposal, it could save a family about $20 every time they fuel up their minivan. So this is a big deal. And we have to remember that in Canada, up to 38% of the pump price can be in taxes alone, and that big tax bill is only set to get worse. By 2030, taxes could make up about 96 cents per liter in Canada because of the Trudeau government's tax hikes.
Now, have you heard from the Trudeau Liberals? Are they considering giving Canadians a tax break?
We haven't heard it. We haven't heard anything from them when it comes to tax relief, which is really unfortunate because what we have seen from the Trudeau government is we've seen them raise its carbon tax 3 times during the pandemic. Now, what we have to remember is that we're seeing other countries provide their citizens with relief. We're seeing a laundry list of tax reductions in other countries: South Korea, Germany, the Netherlands, Israel, India, Ireland, Poland, Italy.
Freedom Convoy organizer Tamara Leach of Medicine Hat, Alberta, will now be allowed to return to Ontario to receive an award being presented to her June 19th from the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. Ontario Superior Court Justice Kevin Phillips says the courts are not the thought police and are not in the business of controlling political views. He says Leach has not breached any of her bail conditions. To give us more detail about this, Hal Roberts spoke with Eva Chipiuk, a lawyer with the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms.
Eva, Justice Phillips did say, however, that Ms. Leach cannot go on social media?
He maintained that restriction as a bail condition, that she cannot even log in on social media. He found that that's still reasonable in the case. And citing the reasons was to stay away from what he called toxic groupthink. So it's a hard decision for me to digest a little bit because on the one hand, as you said, he said the court is not the thought police. And then on the other hand, we hear him justifying the social media ban for not encouraging toxic groupthinks, which it would be think. It's right in the word there. It's not conduct, it's thought.
So, Eva, what is the latest with Tamara Leach's case?
This is actually the third bail review, which is quite uncommon in a criminal matter. The first one she was denied, you might recall. Second was an appeal of the bail, and then the initial bail conditions were imposed on her. This was an appeal of those bail conditions, and as we discussed, it's basically remained the same, but for she's now able to enter Ontario, minus a portion of downtown Ottawa. So the next step is actually the trial, which what it sounds like, it's meant to be about a 6-week hearing, and that we wouldn't expect until, I would expect, next spring, summer.
That was Eva Chipiuk, lawyer with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, who joined Hal Roberts earlier this week. When we come back, how prepared are we for mass shooting situations? We speak with an expert to find out. Stay with us. Back in January, following a shooting at a Texas synagogue, we interviewed a former police captain with over 20 years of service and experience with active shooter situations. He's considered an expert on the subject and teaches people what to do if they ever find themselves in such a horrific circumstance. Well, this past week, the unthinkable happened again at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. The stats are climbing for shootings in the U.S., but they do happen here in Canada as well. And when they do, it catches everyone off guard. We thought our interview with Doug Parisi was important enough to bear repeating. Take a look. Doug, so the website at Safe Defend, where you are currently a trainer, has some interesting information and stats on it. So what stood out most to me was the amount of casualties reported in such events when civilians get involved with thwarting the shooter, as opposed to waiting for police to come and handle the situation. I think it said something like 3 casualties if civilians get involved versus 14 casualties if you wait for police. This is staggering.
It is, and that goes down to what happens when you are prepared, when you understand that. One of the things I do want to caveat real quick with your audience is understand that these incidents are extremely rare. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than be in a situation like this. But what you have to understand is that they are possible. Whether it's a disgruntled employee or something that happens to work, a disgruntled customer, a domestic situation for a coworker or something you're involved in, these type of hostage situations or violent events sometimes just happen to occur around you. And it's about being prepared. And one of the hostages in this situation definitely commented that his training is what kicked in and enabled him to survive the situation. And so that's the reason we're talking here today.
That's fascinating. Maybe talk about your line of work and your experience with shooting events.
So what's interesting is I was in law enforcement for 20 years, but going all the way back to when I was 13 years old, my high school, the district that I was in, there was a shooting. Unfortunately, two children lost their lives, but it was at Parkway South Junior High. I was at Parkway Central. But I saw the aftermath of it. There was the trauma, the fear, the stuff that you would experience as a 13-year-old. And I saw what they did was, they locked the doors, they put up cameras, they got a school resource officer, they got 2-way radios for the staff. And it was all an idea like, hey, this is what we know we should be doing. The unfortunate thing is that too much is gone on in that time frame, but we're still doing the same thing. The recommendations are always access controls and having armed security and things like that. And what we look at is we understand that it's not always about that. A lot of the times what you have to do is be prepared. When I was with the statistics that you talked about civilians intervening, if we have seen incidents all across the country that sometimes don't even go get reported, where somebody pulls out a gun and the next thing you know, somebody tackles them or they engage them or they neutralize that person that's meant to do harm. And so there aren't any casualties. And so the casualty count is low, then we don't have instances like that. Unfortunately, we have school shootings or some other violent attacks that happen at synagogues and things where somebody's not in a position to take advantage of the situation and neutralize it or stop it. And then that's where the casualty counts start to get really high. The reason is not that law enforcement isn't doing a great job. It's just that it takes them so long to get there.
How should people be talking to their kids about active shooter situations? Because, let's face it, it seems that the majority of these situations do seem to happen at schools, unfortunately. Those are the ones that are making the headlines anyways. So unfortunately, our kids are the ones that are kind of caught up in this.
Well, it kind of depends on the age. I mean, obviously elementary or middle school or the high school kids, but especially at the elementary level, tell them that their teachers have plans, the teachers have practiced this and rehearsed it with them. And so that they need to make sure that they follow the instructions with that teacher. When the teacher tells them to be quiet and get in the corner so they can turn off the lights, then they do that. So the parents need to reinforce that, but they really need to enforce the fact that the teachers do have a plan, the teachers can keep them safe, and that in this situation, it's extremely unlikely that they'll be harmed. And that is true. Understand, there was a great study that just came out of Idaho here in the United States that showed the safest place for students is behind a locked door. And then as you get older with the kids, and all of a sudden now the kids might say, if they're 5th, 6th, 7th grade, they could start participating with helping with the barricade, making sure you're putting objects in front of the door, stuff like that. And then as you start to get into high school, you do need to talk to them about what they would do if they were in a cafeteria, look for exits, look for the closest classroom, but make sure that they know that they need to get on the other side of a locked door. Here in the United States, there have been lots of studies over and over that shown that no active shooter has ever breached the locked door. It takes too much time to try and kick in a door or shoot out a door. You can't really even do those things. And so they're just going to move on if you're on the other side of a locked door. Those are the type of things we need to make sure our kids emphasize. But most importantly is to tell them that this is extremely, extremely unlikely that something like this would ever happen. But it's not about the probability, it's about the possibility.
We'll be right back after the break. With the pandemic, for the most part, behind us, now more than ever, our economy needs small businesses and innovators to bring their ideas to market. Our next guest is from an organization that supports entrepreneurs in need of some help seeing their businesses grow and tech companies needing to get off the ground. Tracy Stroud is the Regional Innovation Coordinator at Apex Southeast Alberta, and she joined me from Medicine Hat. How important is innovation and development to the Alberta economy? What kind of impact does that have?
Absolutely. It's so important right now in terms of diversification and providing new types of jobs. So right now, from a global perspective, IT jobs are the #1 hot job in the world. So with the pandemic, it's really increased the need for online businesses and providing a new way to reach new markets. So in terms of Alberta being able to diversify the economy into the tech and knowledge-based sector, it's very important. And we are seeing growth in this area. Recently, Alberta Innovates launched 4 new tech accelerators. And these are global tech accelerators. So the best of the best in coaching and helping more businesses scale up. And so we're getting more tech entrepreneurs, we're getting more companies to scale up and grow their business, which ultimately creates more jobs, which is really what we want to see in Alberta.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, your organization, Apex, does it look to promote Southeast Alberta as a destination for tech companies, or is your mission more to help develop ideas and technology already in the region, or both?
A little bit of both, actually. So primarily it is to help the entrepreneur get started and scale. But in some cases, we have existing companies that might need help with they're attracting the right type of workforce. So right now we have some companies that are needing additional support in STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. And so those positions are quite sought after in our region. And so we are creating awareness that those positions exist. We have local companies that are looking to fill them and letting them know about Southeast Alberta and the benefits of living in the area. So usually it's the entrepreneur development journey, but sometimes we do help companies in a different way when it comes to that workforce.
Mm-hmm. And the months of COVID, of course, restrictions, that took such a huge toll on so many small businesses and perhaps on the innovation and tech side of things as well. So are you seeing resilience among that business community? Like, what are some of the examples that you could give us?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially early on in the pandemic, we seen a lot of companies pivot to get their businesses online. And so we primarily work with more of those tech software companies. But during the early days of the pandemic, we were helping all companies to have an online presence so they could reach their customers in online markets. And so we've provided a lot of digital training supports, and we continue to do that. And so some of the training we're offering right now, our partner Community Futures has these digital squads in partnership with BusinessLink, and it's teaching companies not only to get online and get a website online, but how you can use Google AdWords and all of these other digital marketing supports that are needed. And so, yeah, we provide quite a wide array of training and supports, but the companies have been absolutely amazing to pivot and constantly adapt to the new world and the new regulations that we're seeing with COVID. So it's been great to see companies that have, done well during this time, this very difficult time, and some are even, thriving and doing better than before. So kudos again to our amazing business community.
Maybe talk a little bit about how our economy needs those small businesses and innovators to bring their ideas to market.
Absolutely. It's so important to have companies that are developing new intellectual property, that are developing new products and services that the world hasn't seen before. And there are companies doing it. And now it's a process of getting that to market. And so that's some of the supports that we provide, is to help on those stages. And I would just say, companies don't need to do it alone. There are supports available, and it can be a tough journey on their own. And so why not engage with organizations that want to provide assistance and help make that journey a little bit easier.
When we return, we take a look at the latest local stories from our area that made headlines this week. Keep it right here. With an increase in fire incidents in our city, Lethbridge is taking action. Lethbridge City Council approved the hiring of 8 additional firefighters for the Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services. A total of over $884,000 will be used from unspent operating funds.
We were seeking the funds for these positions going forward. And of course, then we went away looking at a different opportunity on how we'd be able to bring these positions forward and fund them out of the current operating budget. So what we did is we looked at that 5-year trend to see where our insurable opportunities were through our WCB claims, through our long-term, and all of those pieces. And what we realized is that we have had a surplus for the number of previous years that will be able to offset these funds going forward.
Adair says there have been a number of changes that have affected fire and rescue responders in Lethbridge, including responding to calls outside of Lethbridge, and no additional EMS resources added since 2015. A group of parents, students, and community members are voicing their concerns that a middle school known for its arts programs could be cutting a very traditional one, which could have a far-reaching impact here in our community. For Isaiah Chadney, playing the trumpet is a way of life.
Music is everything. Right now, I'm getting my Bachelor of Music. I would love to follow up this degree with a master's and hopefully a doctorate. I would love to be a music professor.
And his love for it all started right here at the G.S. Lakey Middle School band program. That same love of music is shared by Joel Orr, a current grade 6 student at G.S. Lakey.
I like being in band a lot, and I like playing the clarinet, and I like music.
Joel is the 4th sibling in his family to go through the middle school band program.
For some of them, it really was their only place in school that they felt safe, and they felt that they could be themselves.
So you can imagine their surprise when they found out G.S. Lakey has plans to phase out the band program.
It shocks me when schools take music out. Science has shown us that music stimulates every part of the brain.
I was more like shocked and confused than anything. like upset and stuff.
BCN reached out to the school division and was told the preliminary student survey was taken that showed a low level of interest in the band program.
I was confused because my daughter's in grade 7 and was never asked by the school. So if they're polling, like how many kids were actually polled in this situation?
Cher Thomas is a parent of a Lakey student who started a Facebook page called Save Our Lethbridge School Music Programs. In a statement from Lethbridge School Division, we were told, quote, the low expression of student interest was brought to Lakey's school council on 2 occasions. School council supported the decision to move ahead with a breadth of other options that supported fine arts. At this time, Lakey is exploring the potential for offering traditional band for students as an after-school program, an option that doesn't sit well with some families.
School's so draining, and just going after school to do more school and learning stuff would be hard, because at the end of the day, I couldn't handle anything else.
Most kids don't want to stay after school. And if your kid buses home, how are they supposed to get home if their parents work?
And if it's not like an in-school thing, then there's like less of like a passion, you could say, to do it.
If music disappears from the middle schools, then the programs at the high school level are going to be diminished into nothing. And then at the university level, all those students that are now studying to become music teachers, they will have no jobs.
And that could mean no more university students like Isaiah Chadney.
It's just so important because a program like that introduces people who may not have had any exposure to music or have had any opportunities in the past. It gives them the ability to find out if they're passionate about something.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche. Employees at 5 Starbucks locations in Lethbridge are looking to become part of a union. The United Steelworkers has filed an application with the Alberta Labor Relations Board for a union certification vote on behalf of the 115 employees. An organizer says Starbucks workers have faced unrealistic expectations from the coffee giant. Pablo Guerrera says workers are burning out and are struggling both mentally and physically. In a release, Starbucks said, "We are committed to finding new and better ways to continue leading on wages and benefits and keep building a company that matters together as partners." The church community in our area has played an important role in the lives of families, but is it still relevant today? That's next. Keep it right here.